Good evening to both of you gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining me this evening. Well,
good evening.
It's been a year since the last one. Perhaps maybe we should start by doing a bit of stock taking. Where are we right now?
The president has delivered on some of the projects. Remember, about 2 weeks ago in Durban, he launched a cell phone manufacturer at the Durban Dube port. Also, if you look at the automotive sector, there's been huge investment preparing for the new generation of various motor vehicles. So in that respect, he could argue that he's delivering, but it's a glass half full. He needs more to really convince the investor community, domestic and internationally, that he has the right economic policies. He's going to embark on the right economic reforms that make South Africa attractive for domestic investment particularly, and also for international investors.
Of course, so, the arguments right from the beginning were that the monies they were talking about as pledges that had been made at that investment conferences weren't necessarily new. Those were things that were in the pipeline in any event. In other words, a cell phone manufacturing company would not have made that decision 12 months ago and launched it.
Absolutely.
Recently.
But in the environment that we're in, we've got 0.6% expected growth this year, with unemployment close at 30%, and really struggling infrastructure. We need to look at things in a positive light. So in that sense, although the planning was good, we need him now. He needs all the support from us to urge him to take the decision of taking serious economic reforms that are critical. I think if we're going to push him, he might be against the wall and fall into the wrong hands, as we have seen already that the left within the ANC and its alliance are in charge, given the restructuring plans that we've seen coming from the Minister of Minerals and Energy around the plan, the integrated resource plan, as well as the ESCOM plan, that all these things aren't giving confidence to investors at all. So maybe if we support the president, we urge him and push him to be on the side of those that want reforms, those that believe that it is possible to rescue ourselves, then let's support him positively. And I'm trying to do that so that he doesn't get thrown to the wolves that will eat him.
We'll get into that in a moment. Andrew, this summit comes on the back of yet another set of really terrible unemployment numbers.
It certainly does. And, like Lunkile, I would hate to see our state president fed to the wolves. And I think he's to be complimented because we need positive PR. But at the moment, we are sitting with a huge gap. And the gap is between the word and the deed. Now, if you look at the ratings agencies, we had a very lucky escape. But we've got our final written warning. Do something or else, so to speak. Now, we all know what needs to be done. We need to tackle ESCOM, we need to tackle the public sector wage bill, and that's the only way we're going to get our borrowings, our debt to GDP ratios in line. But unfortunately, that's not going to be done until such time as the state president and those who support him feel they can tackle the trade unions. I don't think that the unions are going to come to the party. They would have done so already if they intended to. So I think that any kind of national consensus, given the gulf of political ideologies between what is effectively a liberal democratic government and one which is still avowedly Marxist-Leninist, I don't think that's possible. So it now becomes a question of, is there sufficient political will? Is there sufficient political push? And our margins are just getting smaller.
Let's just take the two examples you cited, ESCOM and the public wage bill. The unions have made it clear that they are ready for a fight on that one because they are not going to be made sacrificial lambs. So already, I don't know whether that's the a left-wing force being in charge that Lumkile was speaking to, but they are not ready yet to come to the party. So what then are the chances of the summit being successful if That's the kind of environment the president is walking into as he goes into the summit.
I think the value of the summit is, firstly, we're laying out our wares on the table. We're saying this is what we can do, and we can still put a very, very attractive package on the table for investors. But they have a checklist, and until they've seen everything on the checklist is okay, they won't come out with the checkbook. So I think in the sense that it shows our potential, it's a good thing. But I think the potential needs to be seen to be attainable, and we need to see an active political will. And as you rightly pointed out, the unions, within a couple of hours of the budget speech at the start of this year, said there will be no jobs lost. Now, that's just not feasible. And what we should be looking at is some kind of basis of doing the least possible harm, providing as much social infrastructure as we can, but not doing nothing. So I think that what we need are positive signs. I think the investment will flow, but we're just running out of airspeed and altitude.
Lumkile, I mean, if, as you say, let's say a lot of people agree with you that it shouldn't be thrown to the wolves, who will then take advantage to the detriment of the country and everything that will go with it. But are you convinced that he has done enough on the issues, the areas that he has power to do something on? Has he? And here's why I'm raising. I'm taking an issue like, let's talk about the spectrum that everyone has been talking about. This thing has been going on for years now. Last week, and this is an interview I'm going to have in a short while, the ICASA came out and laid out a process. They say this is the plan we think needs to be followed. But that's coming up against, on the backdrop of the minister in President Cyril Ramaphosa's cabinet saying this must be put in abeyance, and she has been at loggerheads with the regulator on this matter. Yet you had the Minister of Finance last week saying the president is urging his cabinet colleagues to move with speed on this matter. But these are people who sit in the same cabinet. This is something I would have thought that they would have sat as colleagues and said, let's move on this. And by the time he makes an announcement during his medium-term budget statement last week, he would have just made an announcement instead of urging his cabinet colleague to act on it.
I think you're forgetting that we're dealing with the ANC. We mustn't forget that with the ANC, their ministers have behaved in a very interesting manner. What do I mean? I mean that in areas where they know there's going to be huge layout of infrastructure and there'll be bidding process, some of them have delayed processes, whether it's the water situation where the Highlands Water Project was put aside because the minister believed that Basotho as well as BE had to take part at the expense of national interest, in fact, of both South Africa and Basotho's national interest. And then you look into the layout of both the Eskom, Kusile infrastructure, the Brasa, etc. This is where the state itself, the ANC members and people with power, made sure that the domestic industrial base is destroyed through PE, where we saw locomotives being imported from China and boilers completely being imported from Japan, etc. So this is what we're dealing with. So the behavior of that experience can't change overnight. So that is why that what you just said has to be contextualized in that regard. Therefore, the president is dealing with an embedded culture of a particular way of behaving where politicians don't understand their role in terms of national interest. Until South Africans define national interest, that we know when you go and make that oath, you're not serving your party or any interest group, you're saving the nation. At this juncture, that's going to take quite a while. So it's in that context that I'm rebutting and bring back to you that maybe have a look in a different light. And if you look at it in that light, we need patience. That is why this big elephant of economic reforms needs patience, but it requires us to have a center around the president as well as Minister of Finance to support them, to urge them to be bolder, braver, and make those decisions, because we are behind them. He can have problems with his party and the alliance, but South Africans, the majority of South Africans, are fully behind. We want reforms, we want our economy to perform to its potential. It cannot perform within that grouping whose interest we saw from Polokwane to date has been backing leaders, but the investment drive that they promised that would be different never matured with a huge leakage of resources. So let's try and build a new center.
See, Andrew, isn't precisely what Lumkile has described what is going to entrap, so to speak, the president? In other words, leading to, say, investors saying, look, you've said all the right things, but the gap is still, as you said earlier, between words and deeds. And given that environment, we still believe that there's a lot that you and your government and your party need to do. We have done our best up to this point, but we need you to walk a bit faster.
I think that's absolutely correct. And, you know, ultimately, the world, the investment world, the world of economics doesn't have endless patience. Every day they wait to see is an investment opportunity they could have taken elsewhere. And ultimately, if the politicians or the other members of cabinet will not move because they see it in the interest of the country, then the only other way to get movement is for a strong force to actually move them along. And in that sense, I would agree with Lumkile that we really need the state president to know that all South Africans, or by and large, are solidly behind him, and ultimately the deer in the headlights scenario is going to lead to everyone in this country being poorer. Our unemployment will not turn around till we get economic growth. We will not get economic growth till we get investment. We will not get investment until investors see action. It's a very simple linkage. We've had a lot of time. We've now got to see action. And I think we must really urge, as Lumkile has said, the responsible parties in government not to act with a party-focused interest, but rather to see it as a national problem and act in the national interest.
But where would that force come from?
It's got to come from the state president himself and those closest to him. But that takes us into the internal balance within the party, which is something I can't speak about. But I think if I were to say anything, I would tend to say, and this may well be a heritage of the struggle and the political orientation where things were debated and consensus was the important outcome, and there was a concern and a worry about strong leadership bulldozing. For the obvious reasons, I think there's still a vestige of that left. And I think more than anything else now, we need strong leadership.
Quick last word from you, Pierre.
Well, I'm looking forward to the investment conference. I know quite a number of domestic international investors will be there, and my role is to support the marketing drive and hoping that my action and some of you South Africans who are watching will rally around the president so that he believes that it is possible for him to wear national interest and work with South Africans that are progressive, that are committed to take us out of the road and drive a new hope, with the hope that we have after the win by Mapogopogo, that together we're stronger, and if we are stronger together, we can change the fortune not only of the few, but of many of our South African people.
Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for being so generous with your time this evening. Lumkile Mondi and Andrew Levy on the eve of that much-awaited investment conference that President Ramaphosa is hosting from tomorrow.